Welcome, everybody. I'm joined once again by Andy Talaga for another edition of our Deck Tech series.
Hello.
I got to think of a snappy name. Andy, maybe we'll come up with a snappy name someday.
Yeah, I feel like all of our video series lack a name.
We need branding here.
Series 2.
But today, by special request, we're going to go over a carbon chamber testing deck. This was requested by a couple folks, so we figured we'd just put something together. By we, I mean Andy. Put something together, and I'm really curious to see what we're going to do here. So take it away, Andy, please.
So yeah, one of the problems with carbon chamber testing is the objective doesn't really do anything. And I'm not trying to like rag on anybody, but this is like a tier 4 deck. It's just not good. And
tier 4 can still be fun to play, though. It's still, you can still play it at the kitchen table, reenacting iconic scenes.
Except this deck doesn't have carbon freezing in it, and okay. I don't think in the years and many hundreds and hundreds of games of Star Wars CCG that I've ever played in my life that I've ever put the card carbon freezing onto the table. It's just not a great strategy, and unfortunately, I mean, I wish I had like a good carbon freezing deck to show, because I think thematically it's a lot of fun. It just doesn't really work well because you have to move a frozen captive across 4 sites that are all battlegrounds that your opponent can come down to very easily and disrupt you. So
it's a slog. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a little bit tricky to do. There's a way to do it in one turn, and you have to kind of set it up. And I can go over that very quickly in this video, but it's not an easy feat to do. And then, unfortunately, the flip side of carbon chamber testing doesn't really do anything. So let me go through this. This deck, you said it would be fun to play. It's going to be one-sided fun. This is a manipulator deck. So manipulator decks have their origins in Premier-only format, where you would play like 20 copies of the card Scanning Crew. And you would play go scanning crew, scanning crew, scanning crew, scanning crew, scanning crew. Okay, your turn. You have no characters in your hand. Then they draw like 6 cards, and then you go scanning crew, scanning crew, scanning crew, and that's the whole deck. It's really annoying to play against. The manipulator decks got even worse when the absolute worst set in this game was released, which is Dagobah, because it added all sorts of like non-interactive cards.
Yeah.
So. This is within that same vein of a manipulator deck. And so it'll be fun for you to play. Your opponent's not going to have fun playing against this, and they'll probably just concede at a certain point if you're doing what you're supposed to do. So you start with carbon chamber testing. So this says deploy the Carbonite chamber console, and security tower with a rebel, opponent's choice from opponent's reserve deck if possible, imprisoned there. Now, one of the big problems with carbon chamber testing prior to the release of Reflections 2 was if your opponent didn't have a rebel in their deck, you automatically flipped your objective, which a lot of decks want to do, but this deck doesn't really want to flip their objective. I mean, they do, but their backside of the objective doesn't really do anything. So there's a card, you'll see a light side looking card here, and I'll go over that in a second. While this side up, once during each of your deploy phases, you may deploy 1 Audience Chamber, Docking Bay 94, or East Platform. You cannot play Dark Deal. Flip this card if you move a frozen captive to the Audience Chamber, or if no rebel is in opponent's reserve deck. So automatically, you kind of see what I'm talking about with this objective doesn't really do a whole lot. The front side of this lets you play 3 locations, and that's it. And 2 of those locations, Docking Bay 94 and East Platform, already can be pulled from Imperial Arrest Order, which pulls docking bays. So the front side of this objective basically lets you put the Audience Chamber from your reserve deck into play, which, like, when you compare it to other objectives, those are doing a lot more things. I get you can like double drop docking bays on turns 1 and 2 because you'll have Imperial Arrest Order out, so you can get 2 docking bays, but like, I don't know if that's worth the whole platform of the card to be able to put Audience Chamber into play. On the back side, you're never going to flip with this deck, but, for sake of what the card does. On the back side, well, this side up, your aliens and independent starships are each immune to attrition less than 4. It's pretty nice. And once during each of your control phases, you can retrieve 1 force. That's also pretty good. While you have a frozen captive at the audience chamber, Scum and Villainy is immune to alter, and during your deploy phases, you may deploy Scum and Villainy from reserve deck. Place out of play if there's no frozen captives on table. So half of this game text deals with being able to put Scum and Villainy into play, which, like, okay. Again, it kind of just doesn't really do anything. Retrieving one force is nice, and some immunity to attrition is nice. So with release of Reflections 2, they actually put out this card called Jabba's Prize, which Jabba's Prize is a dark side card. So this actually lets you have an already frozen captive, so you can try to move them to the audience chamber and flip. You can do it with this deck. It's actually not that hard, but it's not really the thing you're trying to do. So this deploys at the start of game if carbon chamber testing is on table to the security tower, which is one of the locations that you start. Frozen and imprisoned instead of a rebel from opponent's reserve deck. So one of the ways that this deck could get really screwed up is, even though the front side really only pulls the audience chamber and some docking bays, you really want to pull those out, because if you flip your objective, you can't pull them out. And then you have a bunch of random floating zeros in your deck for locations, and you don't really have a way to like play your Scum and Villainy because your audience chamber is like still in your deck. So in the past, before this card, one of the ways that you could beat carbon chamber testing very easily is just not play any rebels. So you play like Elam numbers or like hidden base X-Wings, and that's it, right? If you can either profit by this is on the table, opponent does not deploy Han at the start of the game, and you relocate Jabba's Prize to the audience chamber, flip carbon chamber testing, and you cannot move or transfer Jabba's Prize. So profit is actually very good against this deck, unlike profit being very good against, say, like Invincible Court, which is a video we also did going over a Court of the Vile Gangster. Profit is very good against this deck. So I don't know if that's a great matchup for you. You cannot place this card in your reserve deck. Jabba's Prize is a persona of Han only while it's on the table. If Jabba's Prize leaves the table, place it out of play. You cannot target it by We're the Bait or Someone Who Loves You. We're the Bait is like, who cares? That card doesn't get played. It's not a good card. But Someone Who Loves You is one of the ways that Profit would release Han. They just move Leia there, and then Leia can free Han immediately. So because they can't, Profit has to battle you out of the audience chamber. And then they could release Han. While Jabba's Prize is at the audience chamber, Jabba's power +3, defense value +3, and adds 3 to his immunity to attrition. So now he becomes power 6, immune to attrition less than 7, and his defense value becomes 7. So he's kind of hard to hit, and he's pretty powerful at that point. If Jabba's Prize was just released, opponent can replace it with any Han from hand, use pile, or reserve deck. So, I mean, it is what it is. I don't know. You want to get this over to the audience chamber to make Jabba more powerful, but unfortunately, that's not really what this deck is trying to do.
All right. So what are we trying to do? How do we start it?
So how do you start? So you're going to start with the Carbonite chamber here. You're going to start with the security tower. You're going to start with the carbon chamber console. Those are required by the objective. If you're going to freeze things, your carbon chamber adds 3 to carbon freezing and gets Ugnaughts and stuff, but you already have an imprisoned, frozen captive, so you're not really carbon freezing with this. You're also going to start with prepared defenses, which lets you get 3 effects, and the effects that you're going to start are going to be Imperial Rest Order, which lets you, in this deck, all it's really letting you do is pull out docking bays. And then mobilization points, so your force generations +1 at each docking bay you occupy, or +2 if you control, and then there's a bunch of different systems that you can pull out with mobilization points. As well as Power of the Hutt. So Power of the Hutt lets you deploy either Boelo, Bib, Fortuna, Ephant Mon, Jabba's Sail Barge, Jabba's Space Cruiser, or Hutt Influence from your reserve deck. And then aliens on Jabba's Sail Barge are immune to attrition less than 6. So turn 1. This will be every turn 1, in a kind of, quote unquote perfect world. This is exactly what you do on turn 1 every single game. So with that set up, Before you activate, you use mobilization points to pull Rendili out of your deck. That's one of the systems you can get. Then you're going to probably activate 4. You could activate, more than 4, but at least 4 force. 2 from the Carbonite chamber, 1 from the security tower, and 1 for yourself. So that's 4. You use Imperial Rest Order. You want to pull out Executor Docking Bay. Then you can use your Carbon Chamber testing to pull out the Audience Chamber. You're going to use Power of the Hutt, and you're going to pull out Ephant Mon. So Ephant Mon says opponents, spies, gamblers, and thieves may not deploy or move to same site. Well, with Jabba in a battle, he's power +2, and if forfeited, can satisfy all remaining attrition and battle damage against you. And he's going to deploy to the Executor Docking Bay. So spies can't deploy or move to the same site. And while you occupy, opponent cannot move to this site. It's also an interior site, so they cannot use Nabrin leads to get there. So with Ephant Mon at the Executor Docking Bay, there are 0 cards in the game that can get a light side character to that location. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to put this card, M'iiyoom Onith, with Ephant Mon at the Docking Bay. You want to protect her at all costs. And there is a card that shuts this character down completely called Gunite. It just cancels her game text because her game text is just absolutely amazing, which is once during each of your control phases, you may reveal opponent's hand by using X force, where X equals the number of cards in opponent's hand, and all unique male rebels and unique male aliens are lost.
I forgot about this card.
So she's fantastic. And what ends up happening with this deck is you want to get her down on like turn 2 if you can.
Or you're to draw her, right?
You're drawing her. You can pull her out with the Audience Chamber, and then but you'd have to move her to the. That's one of the ways you could do it is you can use Power of the Hutt on your second turn to pull Jabba's sail barge and put Jabba's sail barge at the Docking Bay 94, which you pull from either Imperial Rest Order or Carbon Chamber testing. Costs 5 force. You use M'iiyoom Onith to get pulled out with the Audience Chamber for 3 force, so that costs 8. You spend 1 to move her to the Docking Bay, and then you spend 1 to Docking Bay transit to Executor. So it costs you 10 force to do. Now, on your second turn, you're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 force. So you can do it. Pretty much every game, that's going to be your game plan, turn 1 and turn 2. Put Ephant Mon here, then go get M'iiyoom Onith on Jabba's sail barge and move Jabba's sail barge to the Executor Docking Bay. Starting on turn 3, for the rest of the game, until your opponent has no more characters left in their deck, you will spend up to 12 force to reveal their hand and make them lose anything that's not Leia or Twaska, basically. And 12 is because if they go to 13, you have 3 copies of Monnok in your deck that is pullable from Crush the Rebellion. So if they have 13 cards, you play Monnok used and they go down to 8 cards, and then you spend 8 force to M'iiyoom Onith them and look at their hand and make all of their male rebels and aliens lost, unique ones. If they have 12 cards, you spend 12 force and do it. And if they have anything less than 12, you spend that amount of force. And every turn, you're not trying to force strain them at this point. You're not trying to initiate battles anywhere. The only thing you're doing is using M'iiyoom Onith every single turn for the rest of the game. Because there's no Republic characters in Premier through Reflections 2. There's no I guess Yoda counts, right? Yoda's not a rebel. So just Jedi. So there's no like Mace Windu or Qui-Gon Jinn or anything at this point. And the only playable droid is R2 and 3PO, which is in Reflections 2. So they can get R2 and 3PO, Leia, Twaska, other females, KFC, so Cal Fal from original Premiere. The thing is, by this point in the game's history, so many decks are drawing multiple battle destinies every turn, whether that's light side, having all your EPPs battling together and drawing like 3 or 4 battle destinies, or dark side doing the same thing, that a lot of Cal Fal's utility kind of went away. Not many people are drawing just one battle destiny against each other. And then other than that, there's like Kiri Nath from Death Star 2, Toyron Farr from Hoth.
There's just not many lady characters. So, okay,
Yeah,
so you're doing that every turn. What else are we doing here? So what else is kind of going on with the rest of the deck?
You're doing that until they have no characters left, and then you sit there and you drain them for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 a turn.
So basically, use the rest of just like you have a bunch of powerful characters, you have a bunch of kind of mains with toys.
Yeah, ultimately, what happens is you never get to that point. Your opponent will concede the game because there's no point in them playing, right? Your other characters can deal with Leia and Toska,
right?
And that's it. That's the end of the game. You sat there for 12 turns in a row doing nothing but playing M'iiyoom Onith to kill all the cards in their hand. And
this is just a good reminder of all these like kind of janky strategies that are also incredibly effective if you don't know they're coming. But like,
yeah. And, you have some ways to get around some stuff. So you have defensive fire, which puts a card at random from your opponent's hand into their used pile. You do have scanning crew. You have projective telepathy to cancel anger, fear, aggression, or to cancel battle or force strain unless they spend 2 more. If they are able to get some character down, you have an EPP Vader to go kill it. Or, any number of your other characters, IG-88, Mara Jade, Prince Xizor, and Guri to go kill it. But ultimately, you just sit there and play M'iiyoom Onith every single turn until your opponent concedes. It's
so maybe not
really
the best deck to play with a friend.
It's not a deck you want to play with your friend. This is a deck that you're going to play at a high-level competitive game. And yeah, that's why I said, like, it might be fun for you because you're going to do something every turn, but your opponent's just not going to do anything for the rest of the game. Now, this deck does have some bad matchups, which would be like hidden base X-Wings. There's no unique characters. So as soon as you see that they're like hidden base X-Wings, you don't have to M'iiyoom Onith anymore. You can now just go and start draining at all your locations. And then you are going with kind of the same plan that you would have had from like, say, like a court deck or any other scum deck where you're battling and retrieving 2 force with Scum and Villainy. And you can constantly pull Jabba's space cruiser out. So like you pull it out with Power of the Hutt, play it, initiate a battle, retrieve 2 force, sacrifice your Jabba's space cruiser, initiate a battle somewhere else, retrieve your Jabba's space cruiser, lose the other ship that you had, your Bossk or your Zuckuss. Next turn, use Power of the Hutt to pull out Jabba's space cruiser, deploy it, initiate a battle, retrieve 2 force, retrieving,
I never want to play this deck. I'm just going to throw that out there. But it is really good to explore these mechanics within the game and just, I mean, this is something that people ran for years. So, this is just a reminder of some of the funny mechanics that have existed over the years. I don't think I have any more questions. This is just like a deck. I'm like, all right, I see this. I'm going to put this away and hope I never face it because that sounds just so unfun and uninteractive.
This is, that's one of the hallmarks of Decipher era Star Wars CCG is that it's just not, sometimes it's just not very fun and it's very one-sided, non-interactive. So it is what it is.
Well, that's all she wrote for this one. We're going to do some light side stuff as well. So don't worry, guys. We got a little bit of other side coming, but we'll catch everyone next time.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks.